I want to talk real briefly about just like an introduction to the cross-crawl correlation. Our students here in our dojo are pretty familiar with this concept. Taika taught numerous times, and the Learning Channel video is a good example of that. He talks about striking here and it going up over across the back to the other side. Numerous seminars he talked about it, but he never called it cross crawl, right? He never specifically mentioned nerve points by name, bicep, anything like that. He didn't talk about those things. He pointed at a point and then pointed at a corresponding point and lectured about those things. Dr. Michael Waddell, Shion Michael Waddell, my original Ryukyu Kempo introduction to Taikaseiyu Oyata, dug in deep and called things by lots of medical terms. So I got a lot more medical knowledge from that relationship, as well as Dr. Fred Weaver, Dr. Marcario, all these different people that studied from Oyata or Oyata's lineage, but were doctors of chiropractic, acupuncture, medical doctors, doctor of physiology, and several other people. There were a lot of people in Taika's art all trying to figure out ways to explain things and send that down the pipeline to their students. Cross crawl is a very common term in sports medicine, various different rehab deals, but essentially what cross crawl is, it's your body trying to compensate for movement, really washing things down and dumbing it down quite a bit. I could get into a 2-hour video if I get into too much details, but you really don't need to go down those rabbit holes unless you really want to, because it just fascinates you. Taika never talked about those, and he was a phenomenal martial artist. He never used all the medical terms or anything like that. Cross crawl, essentially, to water it down into its simplicity, there are things, your arm flexes, your wrist flex, your shoulders flex, your legs flex, they extend. So commonly in martial arts, bending is a flexion motion, straightening is an extension motion. We like to hyperextend, so that's a pretty easy mnemonic, hyperextension. If you hyperextend your knees, that's a hyperextension, that's a flexion. Well, as your body tries to stabilize and balance itself as you do various things, certain muscles interact with other muscles and tendons. There's flexors and extenders in muscles, tendons. They all have kind of a role in when things are flexing and when things are extending. So very common strike that Taika would do is striking the bicep, right? We all know, basically, we know basic anatomy and we know that's a bicep. When this contracts, the tricep on the other side stretches out, loosens, and we can get into specific vernacular, but there's really no reason unless you enjoy that. But when this is hyperactivated, that means the corresponding muscle, the hamstrings back here, are firing as well. So if I throw a punch, this is loosening, and then as it returns, it's contracting. Well, some counterbalance things are happening with the body, right? So this is contracting to straighten my arm, and then my tricep is loosening. So these two work in correlation with each other, but also diagonally, the same kind of thing can be said for your body trying to balance itself. So if I'm throwing a punch and bringing it back, and Taika would strike this, most often he would throw a kick across that divider line there to the back of the hamstring. So either the whole foot would hit and hit a little bit front and back, or he would toe kick very commonly and hit the hamstrings in the back. So if I hit the hamstrings first, there's a tightening or spasm here, depending on how hard you do it. And vice versa, if you hit here first, something happens there because your body is trying to compensate. So biceps to hamstrings, triceps, that's just the front of your leg here, but particularly, so it gets a little bit different here. There's kind of a band that goes from the outside diagonal across, basically riding right across the femoral nerve there. Sartorius, but you got your quadriceps there as well. Quadriceps can actually, are kind of a dual, and I don't want to get too deep into this, dual purpose flexion extension, but that narrow band there, sartorius, if you kick on the front there, you're going to affect that, right? So if somehow, like, I throw a punch and it's rotating, I'm rotating my fist and Taika hits the tricep, he would kick here, more towards the front than previously when he was attacking the bicep, going to the back. All right, so also we got flexors, extenders in our forearm, right? So if my forearm is, if I'm hitting the extensors or the flexors, I'm going to follow that up with the appropriate flexor or extensor related to that. So like if these extensors are being struck here on the forearm, then the same thing needs to be done on the leg, the low leg. So what's kind of this position here, my extensors here, well, my extensors are on the front of the leg, the little area right in here that doesn't really seem very like muscle. You got the bone there that you hit your trailer hitch or whatever with, but just to the outside, there's a little bit of muscle there. So I want to hit those two things in correlation with each other. And then the flexors here on the inside, you got essentially the calf area. You got the soleus, the gastrocnemius, again, big giant words. Nobody wants to memorize Latin, but if you just remember this correlates to that, this correlates to that, this bends, correlates to that, this correlates to that. You have the basic introduction. You can get into a lot more fine details of the hands and the feet, upper body joints, all the muscles up around here and how they correlate with each other. But just as a general introduction, forearm and upper arm correlating to lower leg and upper leg. That is your basic cross crawl.